Hello there. My name is Brett Levins. This is my podcast. You have arrived at the next episode. I don't know what episode number this is. I think it's around 14 or 15. So I'm cruising along, cranking them out. So this one is a recording between three of my friends from my musicians group. My home group is a group of musicians, and you've heard from several of them in the past. And Bob, actually, this is his second appearance on my podcast. So Bob, former dentist and general awesome guy, appears yet again. And today's topic is, I think, a really good one. It's around pot, weed, cannabis, whatever you want to call it. I've known a lot of people, and still do over the years, that still use marijuana, smoke marijuana, and don't drink and attend meetings. And we have that shared experience with alcohol. But marijuana is sort of is a weird one, because a lot of people get a lot of benefit out of it. I tend to try to stick with stories. So I think you're gonna get the opportunity to hear here is four people, me and three other people, talking about their use of cannabis while being free of alcohol, so sober, right? And what's interesting about these three guys you'll hear is they all quit marijuana around the same time, after a prolonged period of no alcohol and a prolonged period of smoking weed. So, and I think it's just a great conversation. We'll talk about some stories, and I think anybody that's wondered that question, hey, I'm done drinking, what about weed? I think you'll find something useful in here. So let's get the ball rolling. Here we go. Well, hey guys, thanks for being here. So as most of you know, this will be audio only, so don't sweat how you look.
Yeah, I did my hair and everything.
Did your hair? Well, it'll just be us talking for the recording. I don't exactly know where this topic is going to go. The tape is rolling, so let me kind of tee it up. And the last time I did one with multiple people, we kind of did a round robin, and it seemed to work pretty well. But we'll see what shakes, right? So what I've heard a lot, especially in early sobriety, is this question, and I know all of us have heard it, and it's an important question, and that is, what about cannabis, right? So, and I'm using the word cannabis. Those that are tuning in, we're talking about marijuana, weed, THC, whatever, however you want to call it. But cannabis is what we're talking about here. And I've not assembled, that sounds weird, but I've brought three of my friends to a conversation that I know have, a breadth of it, experience in this place. I don't have it in my story, but I know it's an important topic, and I'm a big believer in, if I don't have it in my story, I don't really have much to say. But if I find people that do, I like to connect them. So my goal here is to give the three of you who not only have cannabis in your story, but you have a common thing about cannabis that you'll probably share as we go around as well. So we can do this any way you want. But I'm going to propose we go around the horn, and let's just do popcorn, meaning whoever feels the heat can pop, and then we'll send it to the next person. And I'll edit out all awkward silences. So we've got that going.
That's the great thing about this. You can just kill all the silence where everybody's just looking, waiting for somebody to talk. Somebody else go first.
I don't mind going first. I really don't on this subject. Mainly because this is probably my number one subject in my recovery story. I didn't realize how big of a portion it was until I had to actually face what became an addiction. I smoked cannabis, marijuana, for 48 years, every day. That's a long time. And I didn't realize that when it came to my addictions and my recovery, that's really where the rubber meets the road, was cannabis. I'd always thought that my main drug of choice was alcohol. Now, I had a ferocious cocaine habit for quite a few years. But it was hard to get back then a little bit, and I didn't have the money for it. I was a musician, I was at the mercy of other people and limited income. So it never really got to bad level with the coke. Alcohol was everywhere. Alcohol was everything. But you know what? So was the weed. For me, there was no separating alcohol and weed. You did them both. Now I did figure out, fairly early on that it was better to smoke the weed first, then drink. Because if you drank and then smoked the weed, it didn't always end well. Then it would just take you to a different level of stupidity. But it would, you'd be spinning around, it just didn't work. Now, that's just my experience. Everything that I'm going to talk about here is really just my experience, obviously, especially when it comes to cannabis, because cannabis is it's one of those drugs that hits different people different ways. It's a psychoactive type of drug. There's no guaranteed outcome for each person. I've known people that have had bad experiences with cannabis right off the bat. I was not one of them. I carried it on. So I've been, this week I'll have been sober from alcohol for 26 years. And same with coke, same with pretty much every drug except for cannabis. I carried on what my sponsor and all my buddies and every 12-step program I've been around is called marijuana maintenance. I used to buck up against that. I used to say, hey, it's the least of all the evils that I've done in my life. Smoking a little weed, for God's sakes, isn't going to be such a bad thing, is it? Because it became legal, became easy to find. I don't know. I always found lots of ways to rationalize weed smoking. Oh, it's good for you. The CBDs are okay. It keeps you chill, blah, 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 blah. Poor man's Prozac. That was one of my favorite phrases. I'm sure I told it to Bob a few times when I was rationalizing my weed intake, and Bob was listening to me like a good man, but
or doing it with you.
Yes, that too. But at the end of the day, it is an addiction. So I knew I had to stop, but it took physical symptoms for me to actually get serious about it. I was so deeply convinced that it was not that big of a deal. And it was the only thing keeping me sane and this and that it took physical consequences for me to actually get serious about quitting cannabis. I developed a condition called cannabinoid hypermesis, which has come on very strong in the last few years because of the increase in the strength THC levels of cannabis now. It's a lot different. It's not your dad's weed anymore, or I should say, I'm a grandpa, so it's grandpa's weed. It's not your grandpa's weed anymore. It's the real. It's very, very potent, and especially amongst a lot of people that were using concentrates on vape pens, dab, all that kind of stuff. They were really getting high levels. And I was experiencing some symptoms, nausea every day, having trouble controlling my body temperature at times, just, a chronic cough, stupid things like that. So I got serious about it and I quit 4/20/2020. And I made it 2 years before I relapsed. I relapsed at about 2 years and 2.5 months. And there again, it was the addict mind saying, hey, maybe you can control this. Maybe you can not be that guy that smokes weed every single day like you did before. Sound familiar? It's the same addict, alcoholic story that you tell yourself with any kind of substance, and here I was saying the same damn thing with the weed after 2 years, So I didn't put in the work with my cannabis program as good as I should have. I kind of I didn't include it in a lot of my thought process with my recovery. I conveniently left it out. I conveniently had some weed hidden in the garage. A lot of the classic setting yourself up for relapse kind of thing was going on. I could feel it coming. Sure as shit, there comes the relapse, and, right at first I'm like, well, I think I can handle this. I think I can do this, and it only took about a week before I saw all of the signs. Now, thankfully, I had many years of recovery under my belt that I could see the signs and I knew what to look for, and I knew my own bullshit. Not everybody does, so it's a slippery slope there. But I could see everything, the behaviors, the thought about thinking about it, all the stuff, maybe if I get a little bit, stash it, maybe, mouthwash, the whole 9 yards, all the shit that we did with alcohol too, same with weed. I didn't want anybody knowing. I didn't want my wife knowing, I had, Mr. Clean off of the weed for 2 years guy, so, I had to chill it, but I must say that I never think about drinking alcohol. Never. I never think about doing lines of coke, but I do think about weed, so it's definitely something that I have to think about quite a bit, in terms of my addiction. I also quit smoking cigarettes about 15 years ago, and I transferred some of that, oral fixation, kind of go out in the back patio there kind of time that I used to use for cigarettes. I transferred that into the weed a little bit, so that there again, that was another obstacle of behavior modification that I had to overcome, so that's kind of been my story with the weed. After all these years of recovery, it's something I struggle with, and I'll be the first to admit it, so April of 2020, that's when I quit. And then I was clean off of the weed till probably middle of June of 2022. So, and then I had a little bit of a relapse there, had, smoked a couple of hits here and there for about a week, and then went back off, and been pretty good about it since then. I say pretty good just because I don't feel safe in my cleanliness yet. I have to really be conscious of it. I'm around it a lot. The place where I work, where my residency gig is, the whole back end, the kitchen staff are like Rasta, dread, they're just like, they're baked all the time. And the whole, you go out the back door, which is the way, that's the musician entrance too. It's just like you have to fight your way through a cloud of weed to get in there, so, but that's been the story of my recovery. I work in bars too. So, I mean, it's been the same with alcohol. I haven't had a lot of opportunities to do cocaine, but I've had plenty of opportunities to do pills and mushrooms and drop acid, and dude, I got some peyote buttons, man, So, but that's just the world I live in, musicians, But anyways, that's the kind of the timeline with that, with that. So, yeah.
Beautiful. Great
Yeah.
start. Thank you, Rob.
Yeah.
And for people listening too, I just want to say something that just jumped out at me, and this is true for me. People that share their relapse stuff with each other is big medicine for all of us, and our stories. So thank you, Rob, for leading us off. I'm going clockwise on my Hollywood squares here. Bob, do you feel like jumping in and adding? Because I know your two stories, you guys live close by. You're both long-term off alcohol, and both kind of kept. Well, let you tell your story.
After all the years of sobriety from alcohol and pills and not being crazy about all that kind of stuff and being grateful for that, I still hung on to the pot. I still hung on to the cannabis. And I did so because, like Rob said, I think it provided me with some escapism, provided me with some stress relief and some just mental relief of not having to be so uptight. And it probably did a lot of good things for me, at least at first. But like every other substance I seem to have run into, everything, it got to a point where it just simply didn't work for me anymore. And I got to a point in my life in recent years. And by the way, I just quit last year on 3/20, so I'm closing in on a year for not for having cannabis. But what happened, especially with doing all those strong hits and doing them all the time, I had this thing called a dab rig in my basement. I had a propane torch hooked up to it. All I had to do is walk down and flick, and here come the flame and heat the thing and touch the little thing to it. And it didn't even cost very much. A little jar of that stuff, it lasts a long time. And it provided dozens of powerful hits. And I would do that multiple times a day. I wouldn't do it generally right when I got up. That would be wrong. We don't want to wake bake. Well, let's wait a few minutes till we have a little something to eat and a cup of coffee. Then let's go do it, So, God almighty. And I laugh at myself because it is typical of the stories that I told myself about drinking or popping pills or anything else. My friends, they're all substances that call us. And they call us at different times in our lives and to different degrees. And if any of you out there are like me and you have what's kind of called an addictive personality, then you may be at risk for being called so much to this that you get to the point to where you're doing it and it quits working for you. And you do some more and it still doesn't work any better. And it took a long time for cannabis to get to that point, but it finally did. And in recent years, I had really noticed that. And I didn't have any immediate health issues like what Rob was talking about, but I just got to the point to where my cough was way too much, and I just got sick of myself needing to have that all the time and needing to have those big powerful hits and then go ahead and taking a second or a third one and not even feeling much different. And after a while, I just shook my head. Man, why are you doing this? And Rob quit before I did, and he was actually a big inspiration for me to quit the cannabis thing. So I followed suit several months later. It took me some time. But the one point I wanted to make was how much of a habit it had become. Again, out here in Colorado, we've had legal marijuana for 10 years. And it's just so easy to get and so cheap and so easy to make a habit of. For a long time, I didn't think twice about that habit. It was just part of my life. Every few hours, maybe as long as 3 or 4, maybe as little as 1 or 2, it was time for a puff. time to fire up the dab rig and have a puff again. And I did that for quite a few years before I got to that point back a year ago, where I was looking for the inspiration to really quit, to really leave it behind. And I also agree with Rob. It's a whole new level of sobriety for me to leave cannabis behind and move into just being satisfied with what's in my own mind without having to be stoned. It took some courage. I didn't think a few years ago that I would ever do that, because after all, pot was legal and cheap, and I'd had 20 plus years of licking the alcohol bug and not drinking, and staying away from pills. I mean, other than the ones I needed for something, like if I had a surgery or something. But in the old days, it was just all the alcohol and all the pills and all the weed and cocaine and all that stuff, whatever I could get. I had some periods of time away from weed. And it's interesting that you mentioned that, Rob, after you first sobered up from alcohol, because I had a period like that too. I had about 2.5 or 3 years where I don't think I did anything in April of '96 when I first sobered up, and I barely remember my rationalization for reintroducing weed. Some friends had some, and it's still illegal, but still people still had it. And I was on vacation. That was always a trigger. On vacation with some friends, having a good time. Oh, sure. What the heck? I haven't had any for 2 or 3 years. I can have a puff. And just like everything else, just sure as God made little green apples, I was back at home buying pot and smoking it again. And did it for years. Did it for years. Did it for another 20 years. Maybe a little bit more than that. So all I can tell you, my friends, is that if it's the kind of habit that's got a hold of you, find a way to try and leave it behind. Do whatever kind of resources you find whatever kind of resources you can to learn about ways to live life without having to get stoned all the time. It really is okay.
Excellent, Bob. Thank you. Jeremy, with the excellent hairstyle that nobody can see, but I can. And it is
my hair looks great, everybody. I'm Jeremy. I don't know. I've been, trying to contemplate how to start this, and with listening to Rob and Bob, it's kind of, my story is a little bit different, but it also converges on theirs because they are both the inspiration for me going ahead and fucking. Can we cuss on this podcast?
We can now, baby.
for freaking quitting the marijuana, stopping cannabis. I heard that Rob had quit and I was still smoking. I quit. Okay, this is getting discombobulated already. So I stopped drinking 6 years ago, almost to the day. And it was an abrupt stop. I landed on my head. And so I didn't have any period of real sobriety, I don't think. I don't want to say real sobriety because stopping drinking was a humongous deal for me. And this is like, I want to say this without endorsing marijuana, but there was definitely a period in my stopping drinking that marijuana was very helpful to me. I don't think it's legal here now, but it might as well be for as much of a damn as anybody gives if you're smoking weed. And so I never had any problem getting it. And when I stopped drinking, it was like, I would roll it with tobacco. And so I got kind of both of those things at once because I had quit smoking, I don't even know, 8 years before I stopped drinking. But I would put a little hash or a little bit of weed in a cigarette and smoke a spliff. And I was able to maintain that so that I wasn't smoking weed all the time. And I wouldn't just smoking cigarettes because I had a real bad cigarette habit too. And so I stopped drinking and I smoked weed kind of regularly, and it did kind of help. I don't know. I feel like it did there were actual positive effects to it. And then towards the end of it, I had heard that Rob stopped, and I was feeling like, oh man, maybe I should stop. Like, maybe that's a good idea. Maybe I should stop. And then immediately the voice would be like, no, you don't have to do that. It's fine, dude. It's just weed. It's just weed, man. And I was like, yeah, you know what? You're right. And so I kept smoking it. And then it started to turn from something that was any help at all to like, it really took a lot of rationalization for me to continue doing it, because the best case scenario was nothing happened. And that was pretty seldom. And the worst case scenario was that it created anxiety where there wasn't any previous to that. And the normal scenario is that it was exacerbating pre-existing anxiety. And it would go from either me just kind of feeling uncomfortable to me sitting on the couch, like, I don't know, it's like the eye of Sauron, like everything I thought about or looked at shriveled and died in front of me and was the worst possible thing that could have ever happened. And then I would be like, how long have I been sitting here in this couch doing this? I'm not talking to anyone. I'm not saying anything out loud. I'm just sitting here thinking about how everything is horrible. And really, I would be mean to myself. I had a really negative outlook. And then I would go, be like, man, it's been like 2 hours. I guess I should go smoke another joint, which is, I laugh when I'm saying that because it's like laughing, looking back at this another horror show that I endured. And then, Bob said that he quit, and I was like, oh shit, shoot. Oh, darn. Bob's been smoking weed this whole time. I didn't have any idea. He just quit. Oh man, maybe I should quit. And it was like both Rob and Bob stopping and talking about how they had stopped and why they had done it and how they had done it even after they had stopped drinking and doing all of the other stuff, and how much that sounded like the voice in my head that was saying it was okay. It was really, really helpful to have that chorus instead of it just being me going back and forth with myself, because back and forth with myself, I could always end up on, let's just go smoke a joint and think about it some more. And it got to a point where it was just misery all the time. It was like, I didn't want to do it. But I thought like, oh, I can stop anytime. It's just weed, but I don't want to. And then I really took a hard look. My like weed sobriety date is May 8th of 2022. So about a month and a half after Bob. And I got to a point where I took a step and I looked at it like Rob said about his recent experience, where it was like, dude, all of this stuff that you're saying is the same stuff that you were saying about drinking. It's all the same. And when I say that, I don't mean to say that weed had the same extremely negative effects on my life that drinking did. Certainly not. I have never woken up in the hospital because I smoked a joint, but all of the mental anguish was there in this constant back and forth. And I would do it when I didn't want to do it. And then I would do it even more because I'd already done it that day. And I'm just going to stop tomorrow. And it became that 3 p.m. beer that was like, oh, we're not doing this today. We're going to stop this tomorrow. We're going to do this tonight. And I stopped. I looked at that. I texted 2 people and said, I stopped. I quit for accountability. It's like, I'm not doing this anymore. I'm stopping. I'm doing it. I'm done. And I was like, whew, did it. No problem. And it was really easy. And I walked into my bedroom and I fell on my knees and I started crying. And I was shocked at this, like, well, it's just weed, man. Why are you crying right now? And I realized that it was the last escape pod. And now you got to be here for everything. This is what I was saying to myself. And that was really scary. And it dipped down pretty low unexpectedly. Got really low. And, I mean, I don't know. I guess it's okay that I say that you can edit this out. It's okay that I say that I go to AA, right?
Oh yeah.
Okay. And so I'm just like, I don't know the rules about the anonymity thing, with the level of press, radio, and film and all this stuff. Some people get really worked up about that stuff. So I was riding my bike one day in July, almost 2 months after I'd stopped smoking weed. And I was riding my bike down a hill and I said out loud, "Let me out." And I was like, well, this isn't good. I didn't mean to, it wasn't like I was doing a performance for anybody. And I got home and I texted Brett and 2 other people, and everybody basically at the same time said you could go to an AA meeting, and so that's when I went to the first in-person actual AA meeting that I'd ever been to. And I was worried that they were going to be like, "What are you doing? You quit drinking. You don't need to be in here. You already quit." And problem with weed, that doesn't really apply here. And it was the opposite. And I found a lot of, like, I guess the point of this is that being able to do all of these things and know that I am actually sober and I don't have a little voice in the back of my mind go, yeah, but you do this, you just don't tell anybody about it, has been really nice. Even in the hard times, everything hasn't been easy, but I do have the thing to fall back on and say, like, well, at least I'm not high. At least I'm not high and drunk, because some things are going to be hard regardless, but at least I'm not just escaping. At least I'm not getting in the spaceship and leaving. I got to be here for it, and I'm happy to be here for it. So I suppose that'll wrap my portion up.
That was beautiful. Let me just insert, just for the folks that are listening here too, because I got to watch this, right? I'm fortunate that I get to go to a meeting with these 3 guys once a week. And I remember when Rob came in and shared that, he was going to kick the weed. And I'm looking at a guy who's been sober a long, long time. There's something to all that, to know somebody has a bunch of sobriety that you're with. It's cool. And for him to share that was very powerful for me. And then to watch you 2 dudes fall like dominoes not too far after. And then to hear your stories here. I think it's really powerful stuff. So kudos for sharing it. You got something, Bob?
I agree. And I agree that what Jeremy was saying was very powerful.
Well, I agree that what you guys were saying was powerful too. I mean, you guys are the power that allowed me to stop. And that's a real big deal, man.
Well, let's just send it around again to do this one then. So what's it like to, you 3 have touched on it, right? But let's go at it. Like, what's it like now to be, no longer with the secret, or whatever words you want to use. What's it like to be free or not using weed? What's that like? What would you say to somebody who says, how many times have you heard this one, you guys at an AA meeting? Hey, what about weed? Like, that's a secret conversation that usually happens around the corner, and it's usually with 2 people, and you're trusting somebody, or I've seen this, that you've made friends with. You're admitting something, and sometimes that person will come down hard on that person, which I'd love your opinion on that too. But the point is that what you're being here is transparent and honest. I'm a big believer in honesty with this stuff. So now back over to this great group. Like, what's it like now? What would you say to somebody that that goes around the corner with you and says, "Hey, I want you to know I'm smoking weed," what would you say?
Well, go ahead, Jeremy. Yeah.
We'll go first. We'll do like a serpentine.
Yeah.
I would say I got approached actually after an AA meeting because I like to I always sit in the circle at this home group of mine, and what's one of the beautiful things about this group that I'm in with you guys is that I've learned how beneficial it can be to actually tell the truth to a big group of people. It was real scary to me at first, and so I talk about the weed thing, even though I was scared that people were going to be like, "This ain't a weed meeting, man," and all this other stuff. And I had one person come up to me afterwards and say, "Hey, I would really like to talk to you about that, like, because of this stigma with some people get real anal retentive about telling everybody the rules." Which, you asked for my opinion about that. I think that it's bullshit. I think that if you're in the rooms of AA and you have a desire to stop drinking, then that's the only requirement for entry. And to come down on somebody for being honest with you is antithetical to the whole point of the thing. And so this person, I shared about the weed thing, and I shared about being off of alcohol for a long time and then getting off of weed and realizing that I hadn't been sober until I stopped smoking weed. And he asked me what it was like, and I told him, kind of what I just said at the end of my talking about the last topic, is that it's like, everything isn't just wonderful, but it's not as scary as it was the first day. And a lot of times it's very rewarding, even if the only reward is that I can say that I'm not high. Because I know that at the end it wasn't helping anything. And I also told him the other thing that I said, that at the beginning it did help. And I'm not telling anybody that they got to stop. I'm not telling anybody they got to stop doing anything. I'll talk to people that still drink. If they want to talk about what drinking's like, what stopping drinking's like, well, absolutely tell them my whole story if they ask me. I'm not going to go beat them over the head with it because they're drinking. But if somebody asks me, I'm an open book about this stuff. Weed helped me stop. I found some solace in weed. It turned on me. And so I stopped doing it. And I'm happy that I did. And what's it like to not be high? Great. Some days it's shitty, but it's not because I'm not high. It's just because it's shitty. That's what I got. Yeah.
So if somebody came to me after a meeting, or even just in general, knowing I kind of wear my recovery thing on my sleeve. I don't go out advertising it, but I work in a bar and I don't drink. So everybody kind of knows, that I'm that kind of guy. If somebody came to me, I would share my story about it. It would be hard for me to preach to them, because I don't think that that's really the best approach with anybody. But then again, if somebody comes to you and they're curious, I would use my story as an example to tell them that one of the reasons, well, I can give you about 4 or 5 right now, but one of the main reasons that I, other than the physical stuff, was that I was sick and tired of people, the whole marijuana maintenance thing. I would share that with certain people at certain meetings, and I would always get that, oh, you've been off the booze for 20 some years, but you're on the marijuana maintenance. So, it's like my 20 some odd years of not drinking alcohol and not Coke, and didn't matter. And that pissed me off, because that took a lot of hard work to stay sober that long. But at the end of the day, is it really sober? I don't, I don't think it really ultimately is. You know, it doesn't mean that I have to be not proud of my years of not drinking, but it's really not ultimate sobriety. And you don't even really notice that until you get to that ultimate sobriety thing, like Jeremy was saying. Once you find that, then you're like, oh, okay, this is real sobriety. Like he said, it's not always great every day, but at least you're straight, and it's just life. It's not, oh God, where's my weed? It's a whole different way of, it's how normal people live. Non-addict, non-alcoholics, they go work out or they go whatever. I don't know exactly how everybody else does it, but they, for me, I can't be getting stoned. It's just not the right thing. And I would advise somebody that I used it as a crutch for a lot of years, and that it held me back from finding the true joy of what life is and the true rewards of sobriety. I had a lot of rewards. And Bob has too, from years of not drinking and not being fucked up all the time. And so it's, I did have a lot of rewards, but that inner peacefulness of real sobriety never really came to me until I quit the weed. So I would counsel somebody, based on my own experience, to try to not use marijuana as a crutch. Don't use it as a way of getting by. Don't buy into your rationalizations. It doesn't do the same thing as Prozac. It's like Jeremy said, sometimes it would make me anxious. It wouldn't mellow me out. It would do the opposite. I was just rationalizing it, that it was doing that, but it really wasn't. Sometimes it would make life worse.
Uh-oh, Jeremy's got his hand up. Jeremy, I see that you have your hand up. Do you have something that you'd like to add?
Yeah, I don't know. I think I wanted to be clear about the this is air quotes I'm doing, really sober thing, because again, the big deal, the biggest deal for me, and I say that unequivocally, was stopping drinking. That was actively destroying my life. That being said, when I stopped weed, it got even better, and I don't know. I just don't want to come off as if I'm diminishing that time that Rob or Bob or I spent stop the thing that was blowing up my life. Just bombs going off. Like, how many times did I wake up in the hospital? Like, huge thing. That was a big deal to finally throw that off. And that gave me the strength to throw the weed off. And, I don't, like I said too, I don't come down on people, and I only answer when asked, unless I'm telling my story about it. And, it's like, hey man, you're going to do what you're going to do. My life's better now that I stopped smoking weed. That's kind of the bottom line, or maybe the way that I would like to have ended my first little talk that I was giving on this question. So some clarity.
Yeah, that's very good. I'll also just chip in on that about the anxiety thing. There is no question in my mind that I have less issues with anxiety after having quit weed. That was always a little bit of a thing for me anyway. It never totally went away, even when I sobered up. And since I haven't been using marijuana, I've had much diminished issues with anxiety. It honestly, it's like a lot of things. Maybe it kind of helps at first, but pretty soon it works the other way around, and it produces anxiety. I do believe that. That was the case for me personally, anyway.
Well, this has been a wonderful conversation. I think we've covered quite a number of topics that I think will be useful for people to listen to. I was never a big weed smoker, guys, but here's where I'm at with it for myself: is I'm terrified of trying it. I just can't take any chances. And like you, it just used to make me just anxious. So, except for All Alone with Mark Knopfler, local hero with a good set of headphones, I'm golden.
So the county that Bob and I live in, there's only 9,000 people in the whole county, which is not a very large population. And we have 12 dispensaries.
Wow.
12.
I think there's more dispensaries than there are liquor stores.
There are. Yeah.
Guys, thanks for doing this. You guys you mean a lot to me. I've learned a ton from all three of you, as you know, in all the meetings that we've been to. If you count them up, guys, it's getting up there.
Yeah.
3+ years is a lot of meetings once a week. So
yeah.
So anyway.
Well, it's been a pleasure talking with everybody, and Jeremy, it's good to see you again.
Yeah, it's nice to see you guys too. I'll make it back. I promise.
Yeah. Thanks, Brett, for inviting me into this. This is one of my favorite subject matters in recovery. So I'm glad to share. Good to see all you guys.
Nice. Thanks, everybody. I'm so grateful for those gentlemen. Thanks for a great conversation, guys. I'll be stoked to share this episode with a whole bunch of people. And I just think I think there's a lot of ways to come at this particular topic. And so it's just really fun to have three stories from three people that I, really think a lot of and, admire. And thanks for sharing it with the audience here that has found their way to this podcast. I think if somebody's listening to this and they're very uncomfortable, either because they're, whoa, no, you're not sober if you're not free of weed. I mean, I know a lot of people feel that way. That's, whatever. And then I know a lot of people that feel like the opposite, like weed is absolutely an important medicinal part of my life and I don't drink anymore. Yeah, that's great too. So there's room for everybody. Here's three stories, three different people. Hope you enjoyed the conversation, and we'll see you on the next podcast.